a podcast called Strangest Fruit.
What's up? We're back on the Strangest Fruit podcast. Please be sure to hit the like button, comment, subscribe. Today was sort of a special day for me. I had a guest on that means the world to me, is who I give credit to, a big reason why I'm free today. She created the law, her and her colleagues, Senate Bill 260. And yeah, we thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
And you know, we were talking earlier, and I wanted to ask you do you understand the impact that you have on people's lives in there, and you know what they look to you as is like a beacon of hope. And you know, I'll share again what we were talking about. I came to know of you in, it was 2014. Yes, 2014. You, Scott Budnick, Javier Starring, Frankie Carrillo, the Mount Rushmore of prison reform, came into the Corcoran SHU, and we were literally in stand-up cages.
I remember this.
Yeah, the size of phone booths.
Horrible. This was the room that had like maybe 8 of them in it. And
exactly,
like in
we're
a circle. This just bizarre.
And Scott goes, "This looks like it could be a college classroom to me." That was kind of mind-blowing too.
Yeah.
Because one of my favorite quotes, I think it was by Einstein. He said, "It's not the 4 walls that matter; it's what's within the 4 walls that defines the room."
Yeah.
So I always kind of carried that, like I could create my cell to be, you know, whatever I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
But you
I
guys,
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even like seeing that room, you know, like the first thing I thought walking in there is just how like who comes up with an idea of a cage, you know, that is whatever that was, 3 feet by 3 feet, if that, and puts 10 of them in a room so that you can have a classroom,
Yeah.
you know, with people in cages. I mean,
Yeah.
but
And the crazy part about it was, you know, the night before we got the ducats, saying, it was 6 of us that I knew that got the ducats. I know more people had, that said, you know, you're going to go to the committee room for an event tomorrow. It said special event. And anybody that knows about the SHU or the hole, there's nothing special in there. You go to the showers and back. You go to another cage and back. That's the extent of your life. So when we did go in there, you know, we realized that the common denominator was all of us had been tried and convicted as juveniles at, you know, 18 and below. Most of us were 16 and 17 at the time when we were convicted. We had already been down close to 20 years at that point. So we said...
So you were talking to each other as like waiting for us to show up.
It was actually the night before.
It was the night before.
I think we made the connection because we were like, what is it? I think everybody slept on it.
Yeah.
And then the night before.
Wow. And
you guys walked in, and it was interesting. The energy was amazing. You guys came in, I don't know, it was in a place where you live where nothing happens. Life is so dull, uneventful. To have these people come in was an experience already. And you guys brought news, and you shared with us about Senate Bill 260.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
How did that feel for you sharing it? I'll tell you how it felt for me, which, you know, eventually I would love to get into the word hope, what it means to each of us. But how did it feel coming in? Did you realize that you were, my life, my world forever changed in that moment?
I mean, I think out of all of the like really interesting things that I get to do in this work, or things that are powerful and moving, that setting, that kind of setting is the most beautiful and humbling for me, to connect with people who I know are in the darkest of places, you know, both literally and figuratively, because some people in those little cages and in that room would have been people who had were really, really deep into like continuing gang life
Yeah.
and everything,
Yeah.
and having zero hope and seeing zero light at the end of the tunnel, and
You loosen the knot.
feeling self-hatred, like is a
Absolutely.
real common thing, in terms of talking with people. And yeah, being able to walk in and say, here's a little spark. This is real. This is, you have it. You have something that can work, and now it's on you.
Did you guys
Now
have
it's
an
on you.
understanding that like we were the hard cases? 'Cause
Yeah,
I remember
that's what I'm
Scott-
saying. It's my favorite. That's my favorite place to be.
Yeah.
Like in that setting with, the hard cases,
Yeah,
the people who are
yeah.
like, don't even talk to me about hope. Don't even talk to me about some bullshit.
Because it's been gone for
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, at that point in my life, my grandmother had died the year before. So like when you were painting the picture of that moment, I got emotional a little because I can like vividly remember like being in deep mourning, like contemplating my life at that time.
Yeah.
Like I was looking at my cell, which is just as dark as that room was. And I remember it like on a daily basis, because this is my tomb. Like I'm going to die here. I spent 9 years in
Yeah.
that cell, in the same cell, single cell. And I remember thinking, this is my tomb. Like it was such a dark time, but I was reaching out to different organizations, trying to write, trying to understand things. I had got my GED back there, which was, maybe at like 35, 34. It was so amazing to hang it on the wall. And it was in honor of my grandmother. But I was doing good things silently because people don't understand, like, hey, I'm trying to change and think right and do something positive.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, what's wrong with this dude? You
Yeah,
know?
right.
But I did that alone in my cell. When you guys came that day, it was like confirmation almost that I was on the right path. And man, it gave me so much hope.
Wow.
It gave me so much hope. It healed me. It invigorated my family, who has done the entire sentence along with me, minus being in the cell. So yeah, it was everything. It was everything. When I went to my parole board, my lawyer at the time was my appeal lawyer, which we became friends, and my lawyer wrote an amazing letter to the board saying, I remember the day, and she wrote a portion of the letter. He said these people came in and there's hope, and like the way he said something shifted in him that day. Mm-hmm. And that was from there. It went to the dog program. It went to getting college, and it's amazing what hope can do. And I'm not, my story is not, doesn't stand alone. There's a lot of great men who shifted right along with me we always wanted to do that, but there was just nothing there.
Like I do think for all of us, hope and kind of all the iterations of what hope means, it's like oxygen. Like we need it. We need it to survive. Don't want to get like too biblical, but there is, Isaiah says, without hope, the people perish. And I think we do that as a community, and we do it as individuals, and we just begin to be self-destructive and, just the opposite of what.
At the time, there was a doc hearing. I was 19 years old. Salinas Valley State Prison had just opened. I was there. I went to a doc hearing, and I talked to a deputy commissioner, and I believe it was 2 deputy commissioners. And they said, you're coming up for board in year 15. It was only year like 2 or 3 at that point in prison. And they said, we want your GED. We want you to get a trade. We want you to stay out of trouble. Try to get positive letters and chronos. I said, okay. At that point, I had 0 write-ups. I said, sir, if I check all those boxes and I do all those things, will I go home one day? Both of them laughed and said, your parole officer hadn't even been born yet. And in that moment,
God.
I was done.
Oh my God.
I made my decision.
Wow.
After that, I continued to get write-ups. I was in ABE 1.
How old were you at that time when you had that
I was
doc?
19.
Yeah.
And I remember looking
God.
through the Title 15, just trying to find something. And then literally like 2 days after that, I witnessed like a really brutal stabbing on the yard. Everything in me wanted to just look away. But I forced myself to watch that. And I remember thinking in my head, you better watch this. This is your life now, and you better get used to it. To my core,
Right.
I was shaken.
Yeah.
But that's the moment hope disappeared from my
Yeah.
life. I was able to identify that moment years later in Ironwood, But so I understand to live with it and to receive it again. It's so huge. That's why it's biblical. Like,
And you, like, I mean, so that was like 1995, something like that. I'm
this
trying to
was
remember your.
1996, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone around you also was probably saying, "Oh, you have a life sentence? It means you're never getting out."
All day. You
like
have all
ever.
day.
It's like,
You're
and
done.
you've probably never met anybody who, was paroled eventually, because the rate at that point was, whatever it was, like 2%, 3%.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were, before the camera started rolling, we were talking a little bit about hope, and my work in California started out working on the issue of life without parole.
That's where you started everything.
Yeah, when I started working at Human Rights Watch in California was for a number of reasons, deciding to start kind of on the extreme end of what can happen when a child is...
What year are we talking about?
Well, Human Rights Watch published the first research looking at life without parole in the United States in 2005.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then, yeah, I started in California in 2006.
Wow.
And it took almost 7 years to pass a law that basically gave people who had life without parole for a crime they committed under the age of 18 the chance to go back to court and ask to be resentenced. So
that's not the Franklin.
No.
Okay.
It was called SB 9.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it just affected people who were under 18 at the time of the crime, got life without parole. And it was a chance to be resentenced. It was no guarantee. It's like several steps away from ever getting before a parole board.
Sure.
But it was the first law of its type in the country. And I think there's no question that it laid the foundation for something like SB 260, which affected you. And that's why we were visiting you in 2014.
Yeah.
But it took a long time to pass it. And,
I met Nancy Skinner too.
Oh, you did? Oh, that's
my
great.
gosh.
That is great.
Oh my gosh.
That is great.
Yeah,
I
Scott
love
took us
that.
to Sacramento. It was, it was crazy.
Yeah, what was that like?
It was just amazing. She's so great. She just went in there with a towel around her neck. I don't know if it was her lunchtime, just spoke with
working
us.
out or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
He took us there. We walked into the floor, the Senate floor, up in the balcony.
Oh, yeah.
And they said, we'd like to welcome Scott Budnick and his colleagues. Everybody in the Senate floor turned around, faced us, and started clapping.
Wow.
I had tears coming down
Yeah.
my eyes. I'm not even pretending like I didn't. It
Yeah,
was, and I'm
that's
literally
amazing.
a month and a half out of a life sentence.
Wow.
On our way back from the Sacramento River from 3 days, all ex-lifers.
Oh, you did the rafting trip?
Yeah.
That is great.
I came back with
That's
bruises
really
and aches
great.
and pains like I've never known in my life.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That is really great. Speaking of that balcony, and you can kind of imagine this. It took us, with SB 9, it took us several years to even get to a floor vote because it would get killed in committee, meaning it didn't even progress far enough to be voted on by the full Senate or the full Assembly. And when it did, there were several years where it would get all the way to a vote on the Senate and it would fail. And I remember sitting up in that balcony, and it's like so ornate. It's like very kind of awe-inspiring, and I think it's probably meant to be. It's like this ornate,
it's beautiful,
very, very old building with chandeliers and heavy carpets and drapes and a lot of pomp and circumstance. And sitting there, you look down on them and just feeling like, if this doesn't pass, how is it going to affect people inside? And I would say all those 7 years, I really was worried about losing, because we wouldn't win and people would still have life without parole, but losing and having people be devastated and, kind of being worse than they were, when we started and they began to have hope. And I remember the first time walking out of that, very very, very awe-inspiring kind of situation, myself devastated because it had failed by 2 votes. and I'm thinking about the people inside. I'm thinking about their family members, and I walk outside, and my cell phone starts like pinging, and it's like family members writing me and saying, "We got so close." Like they were like, I was devastated and worried that they were going to be like, "Oh, my son's never going to get out of prison," and instead, they were invigorated by the fact that we had gotten so close. Okay. And it was, I think that was true for people inside also, but there's another layer that I really learned from people inside about hope. Like one guy wrote me and said, "Elizabeth, because I would write people. I would write them as a group, every few months to kind of update them what's going on."
Do you still write letters today?
Even then, it was like a form letter to the 350 people who were serving juvenile life without parole.
Yes.
I've sent, like when we did SB 260, we sent something out to the 4,000 people that affected. By the time we got to 261, that was like another 16,000
Everybody
people.
in prison loves to get an Elizabeth Calvin letter. I'm telling you, that white envelope with the sticker, I promise, because it's always something like, there's
hilarious.
Something. Even if it's not a victory, but many times, you're like, hell yeah, because it is. It's going to be like the latest news, like because it's someone on your team. Yeah. It's someone who really cares.
I wish I could write people more often.
I'm having all these flashbacks when you say things.
That's hilarious.
Yes.
So this guy, and I probably wasn't doing this as much by the time I did the youth offender parole, but when I was doing the LWOP, the initial LWOP work, everyone around me was like, go for it. Don Quixote. It's like this is, you're never gonna.
I mean, they're not wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was a crazy endeavor
like
right there.
Really, and for a long time, I worried, that at some point Human Rights Watch would say to me, my director would say, you've given it a good try. Let's move on to something else. But they didn't. They kept saying, you're getting closer, keep trying. But this guy wrote me and he's like, "I just want to tell you, I can see at the end of every letter you send us," so this would be the people serving JLWAP, you say, "Don't get your hopes up. Like, this is really a hard road, but we're going to give it our best. But like, just recognize, we may not win," or something like that.
Sure.
And he kind of saw through that and saw that I was worried about people, like losing their minds, losing their hearts, if we lost. And he said, "What you don't understand is that hope is something in and of itself, and we are all changed by it. And even if you don't succeed and you don't win, we're different now than we were a few years ago because we've had hope, and it helps us recognize something in ourselves that is different." And so that'll be true no matter what. It was really, and it was a big lesson for me about it's okay to hope. You don't have to guard your heart.
Just to go all in. Yeah, just to put it.
You don't have to, like, guarding your heart, isn't going to necessarily help you. And I mean, I can say that in my personal life, it's like, it's a lesson that was a really important one.
And it was great just to be part of the conversation. Like, even if you're taking, okay, they're talking about people under 18 and like,
right.
Because there had never been anything. It was, there was nothing. And part of it too, when the groups became implemented, I don't know if that was a part of the Ashker case that happened.
Which groups?
Narcotics Anonymous, CGA, Emotional Intelligence, Alternative to Violence, Healing Dialogue and Action, I love those. In Ironwood, I did it 2 times, and the other times I went and get a ducat, and I'd sneak into the chapel, and I'd spend the 3 days there. But all those were so critical right there. Was that part of the laws? Like, it seemed like they just kind of appeared at some point, which was a huge part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was kind of a confluence of things happening.
Yeah, it was so fast.
One was the prisons were unconstitutionally overcrowded to the point of not, basically California's prisons were put into receivership with a federal court. And the federal court became, in essence, in charge of the prisons. And I think Governor Brown really recognized that things needed to shift in terms of real opportunities for rehabilitation. So this is pretty late into your time in prison, because we're talking, 2012, 2013, 2014. Earlier than that, I think there was just kind of the beginnings of a recognition of we need to give people some tools. Because when those two people met you and did the doc hearing, it's like, you need to do X, Y, and Z, but you probably didn't have access to a GED program. You probably didn't have access to, vocational training that they told you had to have. I mean, so...
And when you're coming into that type of environment at 18 years old, my goal was to be alive at the end of the day, was to survive. Like so much stimulus and things coming from so many directions.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at men that have been in prison longer than I've been alive. And I remember the first time I went to Chow, I looked over and I thought, damn, this guy's fist is like the size of my head,
Yeah, right.
And when I was 18, I had a big head,
Yeah.
But you gotta have, there has to be something there. That was my biggest thing. And especially now that people are coming home. So, how they're treated in there, how their groups are done.
Yeah.
Do you get a lot of flack from people saying, we talked to Zach Scow, who, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He implemented the Positive Change program in about 5 different prisons. He gets a lot of flack, like, why are you helping these people? They're criminals. They
Helping
don't deserve
people
it.
in prison?
Is that, I'm sure it is.
I don't get that much flack for that. And I think mainly, it's because I, at this point, know so many people, and I can talk about how some of the absolutely most remarkable people I've ever met in my life are people who are in prison. And I think most people on the outside, including people who have no intersection in their life with prison or the criminal justice system, have a desire to believe in the human capacity to change and to grow. And that makes what is happening for many people in prison a really compelling story. And I think, from a negative perspective, like with Prop 57, one of the messages was, these people are getting out. Like, who do you want them to be when they get out?
Yeah.
But from, I prefer like a more, flipping that on its head a little bit and being like, these are people with incredible potential. Are we going to give them the tools so they can become, who they want to be, and not be limited to the only thing I know I want to be is a gang member because it's going to make me alive at the end of the day, or it's the only place where I get, positive reinforcement.
Absolutely. Which is 100. Yeah. And if you're telling me I'm never going to go home, what's the point of going to school when my education is right here in the yard?
Yeah.
I can learn everything
what
I need.
I need is here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So what drove you to, how did you get into this? Like, how do you, when you said you were sitting on the balcony and you're feeling the anxiousness of, how are these families going to take it? Like, where does that come from?
I get asked that a lot, and I feel like I don't have, like a nice, neat answer. What I can say is both of my parents really instilled in us the importance of kind of like both the responsibility and the joy of being a part of repairing the world and being a part of making things better. And I think I had some early experiences that made me kind of temperamentally want to be standing at the side of people who were oftentimes despised by others. And those experiences were reinforced because I kept, having these interactions with people who others called monsters. And I realized over and over again, I was meeting people who were really remarkable and people who had incredible capacity for compassion and incredible capacity for, being a good person, basically.
Yeah.
And that just kind of built on itself. So by the time you see me sitting in, that balcony and having these like heavy emotions about it, by that time, and and where I am now, it's just like like these are my people, and not just people inside, but also, so much. You mentioned healing, dialogue, and action. That actually was born as a part of the JLWAP campaign that we were doing, because we started realizing that there was something that wasn't ethical about us moving on this bill to change life without parole without involving in a meaningful way the leadership of survivors, people whose loved ones had been murdered. And so we began interacting. And so all of these people are people that I've just learned so much, and I get so much out of it in terms of, basically joy. So it's a lot, if the question comes like, why do you sacrifice yourself? It's like, I think the answer is no. You're not understanding how much like joy I get and meaning that I get from being, in this struggle with you.
That's always been such a hard thing for me to receive.
Uh-huh.
Like even having like, why would these people want to come into the pits of hell, literally, and just in solidarity with this and feel the compassion and like it.
But think about like our interaction, even though I wouldn't have known that was what was happening for you the next day, it's just a very special thing for two people who don't know each other to be talking about these big, big ideas and this concept of hope, and to have that connection.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful
thing.
Like
when we were talking before, I mean, you're somebody who deals with like hundreds of people of sharing messages. I'm the one person that, received it. So like I recall everything that day. Like remember what shoes Scott was wearing. Actually, that day was the first day.
Those are always memorable. But
yeah.
Yes.
He brought a laptop just to reinforce what you guys were saying, basically about Senate Bill 260. Juveniles have the opportunity to come home. You explained to us about the science, which led me to look up all kind of things. And I went and he opened up the laptop. I had never seen a laptop before in my life.
Wow.
He opened up a laptop and there were guys standing on the steps of the Supreme Court. And he goes, every one of those guys are former gang members, former lifers. So just to see it, oh my gosh.
Yeah. What did you think when he said that?
I mean, I'm getting over just seeing the laptop for starters.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Right.
But it's, I don't know. There wasn't like I accepted it immediately. I don't remember having a moment where this can't be real. It's because of the people that came in. You guys, you could immediately feel the energy, and at the moment, I was so open to just clinging to looking for anything to grab onto other than what I'd been doing my whole life.
In that cell.
Yeah, that had gotten me what I'd always gotten. I was so depressed and sad and alone, full of like self-hatred. I didn't have any life skills or tools, and I just was dying to learn them.
Yeah.
Something that I share, it's funny, but in a way it's partially sad. I literally used to watch Grey's Anatomy to see how they responded to life problems. Where I said, I'm in a normal, that's a true, relationship arguments, not like to a T, but, because I didn't have any blueprint or map.
Yeah.
And I was there was nobody around that I could share the fact that I'm trying to evolve in my mind.
Yeah.
That
seems like a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
It's like the stories that we tell, are all things that we learn from.
But when you're just so hungry and starving for something, there's nothing you wouldn't do.
And when you're in a cell in solitary, and you don't have that ability to like interact with someone, and like the whole thing of the SHU
The SHU
handshake,
handshake.
and like having that physical contact and just knowing that, someone who's hasn't been touched by another human being except maybe when handcuffs are being put on.
Yeah, I mean, can you
Yeah.
remember a specific moment in your life in 2014 where you made contact with a human being? Like, I remember that moment when
Right.
Scott came up and
Yeah.
put his finger through there and we
Yeah.
did the SHU handshake. That was my first human contact in
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah.
And it seems so small, but it was huge.
Yeah.
Like, just so many things happened. So many people came in. And I think Frankie had been newly released at that point.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Because he had just come from Folsom.
Yeah.
And he says, I got out and I went up and I was up in the tower in Folsom and I was like, what do you mean in the tower?
That's
like,
right. Because at that time, we were unable to get people into prison who were on parole. And because he had been exonerated, he wasn't on parole. And so we could bring him in, but we couldn't. It wasn't until, I just remember SB 261 passed.
was that an easier one since 60 went through or?
That
That was
it was about the
amazing when that came
same,
through.
actually. It was about the same. It might have been a little bit harder because we were, bumping up the age. Whereas SB 260 came on the heels of SB 9, the LWAP bill. So we had, for 7 years, been talking to legislators, kids are different from adults. Kids are neurologically, developmentally different. And so when we got to SB 260, it's funny. So we took 7 years to pass the JLWAP bill, and then I pulled together a group of our allies, including 2 people who had been juveniles, got life sentences, and got out. So they didn't get out under SB 260. They were one of the, whatever it was,
through the parole board.
2%.
Okay.
Yeah, through the parole board. And they had been working with us. One of them, had, 3 days after he got out, called me and said, how can I help?
Wow.
And so we had incorporated him into the work. And we talked about what the next steps would be. And that's where SB 260 was born. And it actually was mostly this guy's idea. He's the one who brought it to the group. And we started. So we came up with the idea of SB 260, and I talked with a whole bunch of professional lobbyists about it. And every single one of them, I think I talked to 6 or 7 different people, every single one of them said, don't do it this year. Wait a couple of years and come back.
This is for 60?
SB 260, yeah.
Why? Why did they say
They're
that?
they're sick of you. You basically wore them down to vote for SB 9.
Well, okay, that was my question. We were saying,
Yeah.
are you coming around with teams knocking on
Yeah.
senators' doors?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And
No.
doing meeting after meeting, and then, as the campaigns went on, after a while, a lot of what I was doing was finding other people to do the meetings because, and the coalition for this just got bigger and bigger, but because you can't have the same groups going back over and over, you want, the Catholics to be there. You want,
Okay, that makes
sense. Whatever else,
Coalition, yeah.
that you want other people to be doing the meetings so that it doesn't look like it's just these 2 or 3 groups that are.
So when you say they're
supporting
sick
it.
of you,
Yeah.
are they like the senators? Like, oh God, here comes Elizabeth Calvin with her
Well,
crew.
and there was kind of this perception that that by the time it passed, we had really kind of worn people down, and there was also this perception that they had taken a big political risk to vote for SB 9. And it was in an election year. And so it meant they were voting on it in August, and some of them were up for re-election in November.
Okay.
And so there was this worry that their vote on this bill would be used against them. As it turned out, not a single person faced any criticism in their campaigns, because we were at their ready. Those who could work on campaign things were going to try to back them up. So when we talked to the lobbyists, they're just let things chill out for a while, because here you've asked them to do this heavy lift, and they did it. And I ultimately decided, what's the worst thing that can happen? We get somebody to introduce the bill. Senator Hancock introduced the bill.
Yeah.
And if people are go away, you've asked too much of us and we can't do this now, then we'll pull it and we'll come back in a couple years. And instead, and I actually remember this meeting very, very clearly, and Javier was with me.
Okay.
And we sat down with somebody, like the first meeting that we did, and we described SB 260, and the person must have been a senator. I think I remember who it was. Basically said, well, we have a law that has to do with kids who had life without parole. And I'm thinking, this law literally has been enacted for like 3 weeks. But the way that he talked about it was like, we already have a law like this. Like it had become, in his mind, the norm that we, on these most extreme sentences, we give people a second chance. It makes sense that we would give a second chance to people who don't have as extreme of a sentence. And so that helped us, and that's why SB 260 was passed the first year that we tried.
And I remember getting, I don't know how I came upon them, but I remember getting like the drafts before they're done.
Yeah.
So it got chopped up. At some point I remember you were going to go before a judge and sort of tell your case, and the judge was going to rule on it. And
SB 260 had quite a few different drafts. And one of the things, this is kind of getting into the weeds of it, but there was a California Supreme Court case, Caballero, that happened that year. And that opened the door just a little bit to the idea that California needed to change its sentences for some of the most extreme sentences. But SB 260, of course, doesn't only deal with extreme sentences. I mean, depending what you think of as extreme, it deals with the whole range, down to 15 years. And so, so that created some kind of reevaluation of how we should go forward with it.
Okay.
And there was also a lot of negotiation with the district attorneys, actually, because they were, interestingly, running a bill in parallel that would have kind of addressed the issues in Caballero, but we were running a bill that was much bigger than that, and so we were kind of back and forth. I think it was the LA district attorney that was the lead on that.
Okay.
So anyway, so there were a lot of iterations of it, right up into July, really like right up to like the edge of July. Really big changes as it went along.
Yeah. That.
So if you saw, what you saw that came out in January would have been, changed several times, amended several times through all those negotiations.
And it's really, like what I share to people, it's not like get out of jail free card by any stretch. Like I had to go through an extensive parole board process.
Yeah.
I went to the first time I had, I went to the parole board maybe 6 months before you guys came. I had zero. All I had was an inkling at the time that I need to be better. And with no skills. Yeah. I went to the parole board. I got a 7-year denial. Because I would look back on my transcript years later and be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's right. You know why.
Yeah, and you can look at it compared. And I did the full 7-year denial.
Wow.
And I went before the board in 2022 on February 2nd. Amazing hearing. I as soon as the hearing started,
you got out on your second.
Yeah, he said, go back, we're going to deliberate. I went back in. I set my briefcase down, took a drink of water, and then opened the door and said, they're done. I went back and sat down.
Oh, my God.
And the commissioner said, this has been
What did you think when you were going back in with such a short turnaround?
I was so but at that point in my life, I'd gotten to a place where I was who I was. Yeah. It was not going to impact my decisions or anything. Yeah. I decided to become a good man and hope the parole board just recognizes.
Yeah.
And he said, this is probably one of the easiest decisions I've ever made. Oh my gosh. I didn't hear nothing after that. I just heard the word suitable and
wow. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But to go home and to call my mom, to go back and say, Mom.
God.
She picked up the phone, she was at work, all I said was Mom. And she knows.
She could tell by your voice.
I said, God is good. And just the cry. Oh my gosh. My sister, my nephews. Yeah. It's amazing. And I have so many friends from that Ironwood Sea Yard, a minimum of 20. We're on text threads together. We talk often, who are just doing so amazing at life, contributing so much great things to society, going back into prisons. I mean, we owe that, at least you guys put in that work.
It's,
like we're trying to honor that,
We just published a report. Human Rights Watch just published a report that's only looking at people who had life without parole and are now out. And it basically, we surveyed and interviewed 110 people in California who had life without and are now out. And we just looked at basically, what are you doing? What are you doing now? What are you doing with your second chance? It's phenomenal. It's like 94% of them are volunteering with charities. A huge percentage of them are working with nonprofits, including dog rescues, a lot of people in dog rescue, a lot of people working with people who are houseless. I mean, it's just very, very powerful. It's a very powerful witness as to what happens when you give people a second chance and let them come home. And it means really the rest of us are better off, is what it means.
Yes. And then it's just to come around and to be sitting across from you, like from the last time we were separated. It's amazing.
That's a good thing to think about. Like that.
My good brother right here, Dante, who we're hoping will arrive shortly, was caught in traffic. So we met in Corcoran in the dog program.
Oh, really?
He's coming from a different background, a former blood from Compton who decided to put the dog program first and give her all.
Wow.
Me, I come from a different background. We had crossed each other so many times on that yard, and it was always just one of those.
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? Just respectful, cool. But I had never known him till the day that they assigned Brian James, Dante Farmer. You guys are assigned to this dog, and we were assigned to train a dog together. He has to work in the morning, I have to work in the night. So we figure out schedules and we talk. And in the process, I really get to know this guy, and I realize wow, we're so much the same on so many levels.
Wow.
And I grew to love this guy, and I grew to call him my brother. As soon as I paroled, he got me a job. And I says, hey, man, I know a great guy that ran Inside Out Riders when I was there. And we called Ray, and this just became, it was born.
Wow.
And that's our goal, to try to just put positive messages and show what's possible. Because like we say, this is our friendship should have never happened. This is on a level 4 prison.
Everything, wow.
But it shows when your desire and hope was there. This is post to SB 260.
Yeah. And a dog.
Yeah.
Dogs make everything better.
That's the best therapy in the world. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I always say that. Right. And we do that today. Yeah. He's probably one of the best dog trainers that I know.
Does he work for a company?
He started his own business.
Oh,
yeah, he's starting Canine Hub, his own business.
That is great.
Yeah, he does great work. And he goes back into the juvenile facilities. He goes into Camp Kilpatrick for the Positive Change program and teaches the kids.
Fabulous. Wow. Yeah. That is great.
It's unbelievable.
The
stuff that happens.
Yeah.
That's how I felt with Healing Dialogue in Action. I saw stuff inside there, the most radical forgiveness I had ever imagined in my life.
Yeah.
I was in the circle one day with Javier, and survivors come in, and I remember saying, I've separated myself from gangs, I've gotten clean and sober, I've eliminated all this chaos from my life, I'm finally at peace. But the fact remains is I still took part in taking a human being's life, and that still weighs so heavy on my conscience. How do you even go about forgiving yourself? That was the final thing I needed to get past in my life, which is maybe why I got denied. I don't know. But the woman survivor, there was 3 of them that day, they stood up and they put their arms around me and they said, we forgive you. Their sons had been murdered from gang violence.
Wow.
And in front of a group of all the men right there, completely broke down.
Wow.
It was amazing.
I mean, that human connection too, that,
Unbelievable.
It's that's not something that you could have ever gotten to sitting in a solitary confinement cell. It's there needs to be that kind of interaction, that relationship. It's really important.
And all I needed was for you guys to just do that walkthrough and just boom, just to start the engine, and it hasn't stopped yet. It hasn't stopped yet. So my question too is, I got so many friends that are LWOPs right there.
Yeah.
Still incarcerated, which was one of my hardest moments. Turning around and leaving, as you do that last look, they open the door at 6 in the morning. They say, James, R&R, my bags are ready. And you do that last look. and you see these guys like,
Yeah.
you know, you see David Hampton, and you see all these guys who are amazing men who are just
Zero
like
chance.
me.
Yeah.
Zero chance. These
Yeah.
guys are amazing people with families who love them, coming into supportive systems.
Yeah.
But they just haven't gotten their shot yet. They're
Yeah.
still very hopeful. They are who they are. Regardless of what happened, they're going to continue to contribute. They do great things
Yeah.
for society inside and
Amazing.
out.
Yeah.
But wow, that's such a hard battle with the LWOPs.
Such a hard battle. It's a hard battle, and just this last week, SB 94, which would have helped a very small sliver of people serving life without parole, was not able to be passed. It's technically a 2-year bill. Unclear what'll happen with that. So, yeah, it's a rough battle. I feel like, from a couple of different perspectives, we still have a lot of work to do in terms of being able to convey what we're really talking about and who we're really talking about and what it means for somebody to get a second chance, even with a sentence like life without parole. So we still have a lot of work to do. I don't think it's impossible. I think we might have to come about it in a different way, but I don't think it's impossible.
And how great is it that we have, well, one, he was not a former lifer, my good friend Jared Nava, who works in Sacramento, who had 275 years to life.
Yeah. Life without parole, just by a different name.
Exactly. Virtual life. Was
Yeah.
never going to go home, and just doing so many great things up there.
Yeah.
Such a great representative of change for us, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. He's doing great up
Yeah.
there. There's several people who are working there right now who are formerly incarcerated. Yeah, I mean, you probably were wondering about the Hardin case.
Definitely.
Should we talk about that a little bit?
Yes.
That is, like here we are in September 2023, so that's going to be argued sometime early next year, 2024. Then it'll be a few months probably before a decision. It's based on an equal protection argument. Interestingly, a lot of the equal protection arguments that have come out around SB 260 or SB 9 have argued, what's the difference between an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old? They should be treated the same kind of thing. So more based on age. This comes at it at a somewhat different way, which I think is pretty fascinating. And that is this idea that the way that you get LWOP in a murder case is with a special circumstance. And, I teach a class, a law class every year. And this year we asked the students to describe a murder that could not be charged with a special circumstance. And it's almost impossible to do. There's
no way around it.
There's so many of them. They cover so much, And so this is one of the lower court in Hardin basically said there's the difference between murder one and murder one with special circumstances. That is first of all, almost all murders could be charged with special circumstances.
Absolutely.
But the other thing that this judge said was, when you look at SB 260, the purpose of it isn't about punishment. It's not about the crime. It's about rehabilitation.
Exactly.
And his point, this appellate court justice's point was, somebody who's committed murder in the first degree versus murder in the first degree with special circumstances, there's no difference in their ability to rehabilitate. And and so they should be treated the same. But people with murder with special circumstances have LWOP or the death penalty, but in the case what we're talking about, LWOP, and they don't have the chance to have a parole hearing. So that's the legal grounds. What makes it a very, very, very hard case to win is that the standard is what's rational basis. It's called rational basis.
Okay.
And It just means, in a nutshell, did the legislature have a rational basis to differentiate between these two classes of individuals? Now, it's a little bit harder because the focus is, the question, as the way this lower court justice put it, was, is there any way to distinguish between, in terms of the ability to rehabilitate? Because that's what SB 260 is about.
One's 17 and one could be 18. It could be
It's not.
mere months.
It's really not about age. It's really about
Capacity to-
It's about these two crimes, and the only reason, people with LWOP, on a murder are excluded from SB 260 is because they had a special circumstance. And SB 260 is about incentivizing and giving people a chance, if they work really hard, like you did, and can prove to a parole board. And there's just no, it's my belief, there's no rational reason to say, when we're talking about, well, who can rehabilitate, to say that there's a difference between murder one and murder one with special circumstances. But I guess, apropos of our conversation about hope, people have to recognize that almost anything can be a rational basis. And so it's going to be very difficult for Mr. Hardin's attorneys to overcome that.
Wow.
However, back on, like, this is a long road and it's hard. We are in, like, such a different place than we were even 10 years ago with life without parole. More people are aware of it. More people think that it's wrong. There is, more of an understanding that a person can be someone who's committed a horrible crime, and they can become someone who has many gifts to give to others. And so even if we lose Hardin, I just feel like we have to recognize we're really, really in a different place. We're so much closer to getting rid of LWOP than we ever were. And I think it's possible. And we just have to find, the right, probably roads, more than one road to get there.
Yeah, because when I look at, like, my friends in there with LWOP, and I'll think, you committed your crime at 18 and you were just sensed like you're irredeemable forever.
Right. Yeah.
Like, wow, like, just forever.
Yeah.
And for the people that argue against it, I understand it completely. Like, there was a victim in this case, and there was a family, and there was an entire ripple effect. But what service are we doing to those people who suffered that by continuing to, incarcerate this person forever? And the person it's not a get out of a jail free card. You actually go before a parole board. It's a rigorous process that you're going to go through. So it's not a freebie or a free way out. What do you think about? I remember maybe the year prior when I was going before board, there was some kind of I think a cop was killed or something in El Monte, and I remember my fear so bad. It was a guy that they're saying, he just got released from jail on one of these new laws. It was actually he was arrested for stealing some food, or I forgot exactly what it was. But my fear was that everything's going to get reversed. And I know a lot of guys inside, like, the word used to always be like, we got to get home before this window closes. Like, I was also in fear of that window closing, because I saw how quick things shifted in the early 90s, with the cases and 3 strikes, and when the emotions rise, how quick a law gets put into place, and how many years it takes to actually dismantle that. But is that fear there with you and people that do your work?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on right now with people talking about there is, like, increase in crime. There's an increase in violent crime, although we've just had homicides start to go down. I think it's a mistake, because I'll have a lot of people say to me, the pendulum, it's going to swing one way and then it's going to swing another way. Yeah. And I really think that it's a mistake to think like that. I think there is not a pendulum. Things can change, and we just have to be kind of ready to have an alternative explanation for what's going on. we need to be examining the reforms that we've made and making sure that they're working and seeing what needs to be the next thing.
That's so great. It's so great that you said
But
that.
not, I mean, we, again, are in a different situation than we were in the 90s for a lot of reasons. And one is, particularly when we're talking about young people and young adults, there is a solid understanding of the neurological and developmental differences between adults and adolescents, which is now understood to go through the mid-20s. And we're not going to completely lose that. And we just have to, I mean, we have a long ways to go in so many arenas. I think we have to be aware of that, aware that, yes, we've made some, like SB 260, think about it, it's a back-end fix. It's a fix that says,
what do you mean?
Well, it means like, go ahead and keep giving people sentences that are 100 years long, and we will give them a chance to, rehabilitate and, prove themselves at the back end, as opposed to, focusing on changes that could happen, at the front end that might, although there's been some of that might incentivize. So when you entered prison and you had that doc hearing 2 years in and you're like, okay, that's, it's clear to me what path I should choose. I think there's things that, can be done very early on, even prior to someone being sentenced to prison, that, create a different pathway. So I back on the, like, are we entering into a time where the window is closed? I mean, I might be wrong, but I don't think so. I think we just have to be smart, and we have to be careful about what we choose. I think for those of us who do, criminal justice reform, we really must be people who are thinking beyond just the person who's committed the crime. And, like I mentioned early on in the LWOP work, we recognize that there's like an ethical reason. There's reasons to be, as far as being effective also, but there are ethical reasons to make sure that the movements that we create and the efforts that we work on are, really for, creating justice for everyone. And so I think that's including victims and survivors. If I'm not saying that clearly enough, like,
no, I got it, because that was one of my favorite parts of the restorative justice and the healing dialogue, is when it was pointed out to me that when you go to court, you have the offender, you have the victims. You guys are not to look at each other like it's such, and there's no healing involved. And I remember Javier, like, he always saying, like, he wants to make that part of the which, oh my gosh, that would, what a battle that would be. Or even part of the parole board system, to make it that model right there, or some version of that model, but that's, a lot of people are not at that point ready, because that's a level of compassion and forgiveness unlike I've ever imagined. I've seen a father whose son died from gang violence, and the actual person who did it, he called him his son, and he visited him. Unbelievable. Yeah. I met him in Ironwood in Christmas time. It was unbelievable.
I don't, that's the other thing, is I don't feel like those stories are so compelling, but I think people can dismiss them also and just say, well, that person's a saint. They're like on the extreme end of it. But there's a lot of space between feeling like I want you to die in prison and, I'm going to call you my son. There's a huge spread of people just being able to see each other as human beings, both ways. Sure. I mean, as somebody who's been, seeing the survivors as somebody who's been really deeply injured, and the survivor being able to, see the person who committed the crime as a full human being also.
And for someone who's committed that actual crime, and to see, like, victim survivors come in and tell their stories, you're never the same again. I couldn't imagine. Yeah. I couldn't imagine on this journey of change. There's so many things happen to me that just unbelievable.
So many people say to me that and I kind of hear you saying it's like that's like one of the most powerful things in prison is being able to be in a setting like that where survivors are there with you in person and talking about their experience and sharing with you or whatever, even short of the "we forgive you," like just the being willing to engage with you.
Sure.
It's just a very powerful thing.
Because you get that perspective. Like, years back, I would go back and read my transcripts and I wanted to learn more about, my victim and him as a person. Because there's a shift, there's a conviction that comes in me. And it's important to hear that. Like, you understand the process and it makes you a better person for them. Because the way I looked at it, for better or worse, because of my decisions, our stories are forever interlocked, mine and his.
Yeah.
So I need to feel that responsibility and do something with that so that this didn't happen in vain. And the only way is giving back or doing something or sharing my story. That's the only way that I can, because the parole commissioner and the board said, how do you make it psychologically okay for you to live knowing you did that?
Yeah.
And I was so glad that because I had spent so much time thinking and writing about that right there. It was a huge.
Do you deserve this kind of? Is that kind of what he was asking?
Do you deserve to go home? I said, absolutely not. I said, I don't feel I deserve to come home. I explained my level of remorse and how I felt and how I changed my life and how, regardless if you find me suitable today or tonight, I'm going to continue being this person that I'm sharing with you. But I'm here asking for an opportunity, for a second chance. But deserving, I wasn't sure if I was deserving.
Yeah.
I'm not deserving of anything after what I did. Is how I felt. It's
kind of like there's an element of mercy. Of where does mercy come in? Mercy being, something that's not necessarily earned. But, gives a little element of grace. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess
unmerited grace.
Yeah.
Like just mercy in the book. Just mercy. He explained it as unmerited.
But I think I'll say as someone who wasn't in your shoes, that if we believe that someone who commits a murder never really deserves to be out. I feel like that takes us to a place that I don't want to go. I believe we have to figure out kind of what's enough punishment. We have to recognize that that's part of what our system is doing. I'm, leaving aside whether our system, works or whether it's right or whatever, part of what it's doing is punishing somebody. And there has to be a point at which, okay, the punishment's enough, and because you're never going to bring back the person who died.
Is that so hard of an argument to make, or a case? Not necessarily an argument, but when you're making that case, because the comeback's always, they're never coming back, so why should he? Yeah,
but I think it's something that you said earlier too. It's we've reached a point where it's not going to make a difference. It's not going to make things better, and for many of you who are getting out, when you get out, you are doing things that make things better. At a minimum, people are taking care of elderly parents. They're financially supporting other people. This is what we saw when we did this study of people who had LWOP and are now out, is the vast majority of them are financially helping other people, whether it's family members or friends. They're taking care of elderly parents. A huge percentage of them have moved into a role of being a healthy adult in a young person's life. Many of them are working, going back into prisons and youth facilities. Yes. And so really, really, in a very real sense, making the world a better place. And so I think as a society, as a state, California has to make a decision, okay, when is enough as far as the punishment? And then the question is, did you work in a way, if you have an indeterminate sentence, did you work in a way that makes you eligible for release? But I know, I know many people who had the same in your situation, had the same response of, no, I don't deserve this. But I don't know. I think you did.
Yeah. Well,
I think you did,
honestly,
and you also did something that can never be changed.
Sure.
You know?
And we had these debates in prison
Yeah.
over the question, do you deserve? Because we read transcripts and we're looking into ourselves and trying to understand better. And I kind of felt like I said I do, in the fact that like I made genuine change and I worked really hard to become this man that I am today. But there's a big difference between articulating that to the board, because it can be taken in such a way.
Right.
Which
I deserve this. Yeah, it would be in the board. It would be difficult.
Like
to
a
sit.
sense of entitlement. Like,
I mean, maybe if the question was, is it fair? Is it fair for you to be, out and living life when your victim and everybody related to him don't have that that kind of opportunity. But then, like, a lot of things are not fair, and we have to just kind of live with that. And I don't know.
When you go through the board process, you somewhat have determined the individual that's going to be returning back to the streets. And even after getting found suitable, it takes 120 days for the board to review it. It went to the governor's desk, where no action was taken, which was the longest 148 days of my life.
Who was your attorney?
Okay, so I had I don't even remember his name at the time. It was just a state appointed.
Oh, but okay, you're saying your appellate attorney wrote you a letter for your
Christine
parole.
Aros.
Okay.
Yeah, she's in San Diego now.
That's great.
Yeah. But my appellate attorney too encouraged, not my appellate, excuse me, my parole board attorney encouraged me to postpone my actual hearing.
Oh, really? Because after 7 years?
Yeah, I have no idea because I guess they had switched the commissioners or something at the time. But
he's
I was
worried
like,
about the commissioners.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Please, I'll see you in there. I
Yeah.
didn't even necessarily need him for anything other than to make sure the legalities were covered.
Yeah.
Because it's my life on the line. And I went in there comfortable. Like I was genuine.
Yeah.
What was your greatest moment where you were just like, because I talked to my my friend Darlene, who was really active in SB 260 and Anti-Recidivism Coalition. I'm sure you've met her at some point. Robert Luca is her husband. Amazing guy over there.
Yeah.
I remember her sharing with me the joy when SB 260, she's like, when being able to deliver that news to you guys. Like, has there ever been, like, been your moment where it's...
Oh. Wow. I don't know. I've had a lot of, I've had the good fortune of having a lot of moments where we just feel like, oh my God, I can't believe that we've come to this place where, people are going to have a real opportunity to get out.
And it's it's heartbreaking work for the most part, it seems like.
There's a lot of heartbreak in it. It's funny, I think, you'll probably appreciate this more than the average person. I think the law that I have worked on that affects the fewest number of people is the one that I think felt the most emotional about, and that was the law that I mentioned to you earlier, SB 1391, which makes it impossible for someone who's under the age of 16 to be prosecuted as an adult and face adult sentences like you did. And California is the only state in the nation that has prohibited, the youngest kids from being tried as adults. And I don't know. And by the time we passed that law, there really weren't that many people who were 14 or 15 and were being tried as adults.
Okay.
Because the state had, in part because of laws that we had helped pass, the state had been moving away from trying the youngest as adults. But it still felt like, and it actually ended up affecting a lot more people than I thought it would, but it just felt like, wow, like these individuals are not going to be sent to a level 4 yard, at age 18.
So huge.
They are not going to have to make the decisions that you made which is, make myself look at that stabbing so that I harden myself and, gird myself ready, choosing to be full on, I assume, in your gang so that for protection and meaning and purpose and everything else, acceptance.
Absolutely.
And, our juvenile system is not perfect, but it's better than what you went through. And
most definitely.
Yeah. So
even when I
so that's like a little. It was very difficult to pass. Like I said, it affected the fewest number of people of any law that I've worked on, and it still makes me get kind of teary-eyed thinking about it.
What about closing the youth authorities?
Yeah, that
YTS,
was yeah.
school.
That's we're still really in the throes of that because there's just like tremendous conflict around kind of the next steps with that.
When in terms of where they're going to go?
Yeah, where they're going to go, how they're going to be treated, what kind of facilities, they're going to be locked in. And, but yeah, that was one of those, I guess, as you're asking, there's like points where you are aware that we're at a line. We're at a line, and from this point forward, it will be before we close DJJ and after we close DJJ.
Okay.
It will be before we recognized that it was wrong to send 14-year-olds to the adult system, and then after we recognized that. And I think those are some of the moments that are, in terms of the work and, something passing or whatever, that are the most meaningful. But I think, the real, like super, super happy moments are like kind of like you telling me about that connection that we had.
Yeah.
And knowing that, it was a brief connection, but we both were like you and I both were just all in, trying to connect as two human beings.
Yeah.
And it's just powerful. So when I hear of those later, which has happened, a fair amount, it's just like really meaningful about, to be a part of something that's that kind of human connection where, we're pulling each other up, or, I'm handing you some hope that helps you pull yourself up, and that kind of thing I think those are the most powerful moments for my work.
That's why my first question was, do you know, are you conscious of that? And at the time too, I had 2 tattoos over my eyes. It's since been removed. I've done tattoo removal at Homeboy Industries.
Nice. Looks good.
Yeah. I still got a couple more rounds.
Yeah.
But that was important for me too.
Yeah.
What about like the more difficult moments? Like, are there any that stick out? Like, which I can imagine there's many in this line of work.
Yeah.
Which you've been doing for how long? Like.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing this work in California for 18 years.
Okay.
And
way back when it was not cool.
Yeah, it really wasn't. It
was
really
not
wasn't.
cool.
There was
Yeah,
like
no.
we could not get
Public
some of
Enemy
our
#1.
regular, kind of expected allies to join in on it, because they were like, yeah, no, it's like, so I think, the thing they were talking about earlier, for a while it was, sometimes, well, for a while it was hard, this concern that like people would, grab onto hope and then have their hopes dashed and be suicidal. And in fact, in the
did you have it? You've mentioned that a few times. Was that an experience you had, or just something?
Yeah, no, we had
where people took it extremely hard.
Yeah. No, actually, I didn't have it where people took it extremely hard. This was just my own, thing. It was, and of course, we ultimately won, and so we didn't have a situation where I was having to say, I guess we just can't do this or whatever, which I don't, I'd like to think we wouldn't have said that to begin with, but no, I think I was just worried because people were in such a dark place.
Yeah.
and really just thought absolutely they were going to die in prison. You probably thought you were going to die in prison, but you understand that someone with life without parole, that's a whole different layer.
They're watching everybody go to board, all their friends.
But even when people weren't getting out, it just was another layer. It's like you didn't even let yourself think about going to board because you never would.
Gone.
Yeah,
He's never.
Yeah. So there's that, and we did have like in the last year of working on that, for whatever reason, I had 3 or 4 people write me and say, like, indicate one way or another that they were suicidal, and yeah, it was hard.
Wow.
I mean, it was like a difficult. It was difficult. I think, and this might be just because the session just ended, but the last few years have been acrimonious in a way that I feel like I still need to kind of process this. With SB 9 and SB 260, there was a lot of heavy opposition, and with SB 9 in particular, a lot of it was just very intense from survivors, and like constantly, every 6 months or so, I would ask to meet with some of the victim groups, and we there was
Nothing.
no way to connect, because it was like, no, there's nothing, there's no middle ground. And I'm sure they felt that way with us also. And so that was hard, but it was kind of understandable.
Sure.
And, in the last few years, particularly related to the juvenile work, there's just been a lot of kind of acrimonious, mainly from law enforcement interactions. And sometimes the work is hard because it just feels like we should be able to find some common ground on some of these issues. To me, it's very obvious, and obviously other people, it's not obvious to. To me, it's very obvious that this capacity for human beings to dramatically change, to become people who have so much to give. And I think for people who are focused on, but they need to be punished, it's possible for people to be punished also. And then, but we still have, a segment of the population, and it's not all law enforcement. There's a lot of law enforcement that is now really kind of focused on rehabilitation. We might disagree about how to get there, but there's been some pretty dramatic shifts.
Everybody wants the same thing.
Yeah.
So there has been within law enforcement.
I think, think even about CDCR, there's whatever,
it has changed.
Like in your time there, pretty dramatic.
Well, before,
not like it's, not like it's perfect or something, but I'm just saying there's been a pretty big shift.
It was actually another LWOP. We always had an idea of like a group where we would all wear the same thing. It would be like 30 to 40 people in a circle, and there'd be correction officers sprinkled within and wearing the same thing. And you just kind of go around and share about your life. No intense details, but just kind of find like similar connections and stuff like that. I mean, that was a big jump.
The idea being,
before
like, you couldn't tell each other apart
it's just
by your life stories, because it would be,
put us on the same plane and all that.
Yeah, that's
but before we left, we actually did that. I wasn't able to make it, but they had maybe about 20 inmates and about 10 of the officers on the yard.
Wow.
And they kind of talked about, like, what's your biggest grievance with the inmate population? The shirts and chow not tucked in or ignoring us. What's with yours? And it did start a dialogue. It
wow.
did. And then
you both answered that question?
Both sides answered. And there was a portion that, like,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And there was a portion of what do you do after work? How do you relax? How do you relax? And it's so more like a humane,
neutral question.
Yeah. But I was like, this was unimaginable years ago. Like unimaginable. Like you don't even have contact with them, period. Like you don't talk to them. It's them against us, and which was a horrible at the time. But definitely seen like the growth, which I want to ask, it seems like all of a sudden in 2014, and I know a lot of people, like the floodgates open and all this prison reform.
Yeah.
I mean, they're hearing now the years and the years that the revisions and the laws and the knocking on the doors and all that. But did it seem like, it just seemed like everything happened so fast?
Yeah, I mean, there was a long, dark period. Very long, dark period. And yeah, then I think several things happened. Prop 36 passed in 2012. SB 9 was the first, sentencing change, basically. It's a law that changes a sentence. And it just began, like I mentioned, some of the legislators who voted for SB 9 in 2012 were worried that it was going to get them unelected.
Okay.
And that didn't happen. And so it sent a message that you can vote for progressive criminal reforms, and it doesn't mean you're going to be, unelected.
Yeah.
So I think that was true for, a number of little piecemeal things that happened at that time period.
It just seems like some good was happening for everybody. And everybody that was doing the right thing. I want to always reiterate, you always have to earn your way out. There's the door just doesn't swing open. You got to put in the work.
Life sentences, yeah.
Yeah, even, people that are earning these credits, like there's, like I met guys in the beginning of the group, if I'm facilitating, I say, who's here just for the rat credits? Who's here just to get a little time knocked off? Yeah.
People raise their hands.
We'll have a few guys on. I appreciate your honesty, but you're sitting here, so that's all that matters.
Yeah.
And a month later, I'd ask them the same question, and they're not anymore. Like they've kind of caught on with the topic, and you've challenged some of my beliefs in this program. So, yeah, it just seemed like in that time, like everything just seemed to have happened so fast.
Yeah.
So
what kind
fast.
of groups did you lead?
Criminal, Gang Members Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. I was in Alternative to Violence with Abraham.
Yeah.
I was Healing Dialogue in Action.
Yeah.
But my greatest one, I mean, I love them all, but they really helped me in my life. Was the Positive Change Dog Program for sure. The dog. So my dog I did the program twice. My dog spent 14 weeks with me in the cell training. The trainers would come in. We'd be given techniques every Wednesday. And the goal was to get those dogs adopted. A lot of our dogs got adopted to families in Arkansas all over. My mom adopted my dog.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that is so great.
I got and this is in 2017, and my second dog in 18. She's like, I'm not going to be adopting every dog you train.
Did she adopt the second one? She
adopted the second one because I said, Mom, this is my soulmate. You cannot let this dog out into the world. So 4 years later, I came home and my dogs were right there.
God.
It was.
Did somebody film that?
Yeah.
Seeing you get out and
they came up. They sniffed me for about 3 seconds. It just jumped up. It was the greatest feeling in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do they still live with your mom?
Yeah. They're still there with her. I'm not gonna get them. She's like, those are my dogs now. That's our house.
Right.
But
that's great.
Yeah, but that was definitely one of like the most greatest ones. I also now too. Do you pay attention to in your line of work or for yourself, like the post prison, like the transition world? Which
some yes, okay. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
What are your do you have thoughts on that? Or there's things you want to implement? I think that's really important too.
Yeah.
People coming home, because everybody's coming home with this. Like I always said, I came home I'm fully equipped in this world. I just have to learn how to execute these skills. Because my last reference point was at 16 years old when I was out here.
Right. Well, how did you feel the transitional living home that you went to did in that regard? Because when people first started getting out, oh my God, there were the transitional living homes for the most part had people who were coming out of jail, and more accurately, like cycling in and out of jail, and had not done any of the work for the most part. And so, and then sprinkled in were former lifers.
Yeah, that's.
And so then they would say, "Well, okay, you can start leading the groups," and I remember early on people having to do some absurd, like 6 hours a day of groups for people who were former lifers. That they've just done 15 years of groups.
Yeah, exactly.
And they
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
be doing things like, well, how do I get my driver's license?
Exactly,
And
exactly.
set up a bank account and all that kind of stuff. But so Amity and some of the others that began to like focus on lifers.
Well, they had to my knowledge, that's the only actual lifer house, which was the Amity Beacon House, which was when I was there, 45 to 50 of us, like everybody lifers.
Yeah.
And it was great because they treat you so good right there. Like they give you good food. Like it's really like a home environment. Obviously, it's a curriculum, rather like more individual based. Like for us, I think it was 6 hours a week of groups.
Okay.
Which is fair.
That's
Which is
different.
it's fair, but it's still hard after you've been like. I literally had spent the last 5 years pushing myself, just overnight essays and writing and board prep and preparing the board portfolio. Like I had been so grouped out, so to go in there and do groups, it is a little off-putting.
Yeah.
But they do drive you to the DMV. They do walk you through those processes. But I know there are some that are fall behind on that. The one I was at was great, but I think it's so important for these people that are coming home just to walk them through the whole process. I mean, you're on the front end creating the opportunity. The opportunity takes place, and then, once they do go home.
I mean, I think it's a critical component to people succeeding when they get out.
Sure.
Is having that kind
and
of
I was
support.
blessed with a family and an amazing support network.
Yeah.
So, going forward, what are you doing today? What are you working on?
Well, the last few years, my work has been kind of in a couple of different realms. One is working on life without parole and building leadership capacity among people who either currently have life without parole, but especially people who had life without parole and have gotten out either because of a commutation or if they were juveniles because of the juvenile laws, or some of them have gotten out under other laws that have passed. So we're doing leadership training for people who are former LWAPs.
Okay.
We're doing that both in prisons for people who are currently LWAP, outside of prisons. We a couple of years ago established a national LWAP Leadership Council. So it's a council of 14 members. I think they're from 6 states right now. And they are people who want to play a special role in helping to lead the country to the end of life without parole. And so they do everything from, they have a speakers bureau that actually includes other former lifers, but is led by the council. So I think in the spring, they did, I can't remember, it was like 30 presentations to college and university classrooms.
That's huge. Wow.
They have developed a talking points guide for helping, in particular, people who are formerly incarcerated know how to talk about and to kind of think through the messaging on ending life without parole and how to, proceed with respect and compassion towards survivors and kind of understanding what some of their concerns and, things that they don't like about that movement. They are assisting with different legislation in different parts of the country. So actually, Abraham was one of 3 people who we sent to Rhode Island to testify in favor of a bill there. And they're doing a lot of social media stuff. So they're playing this kind of role of, we are people who've experienced life without parole, and we're going to talk about why we need to end it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where's our LWAP sign? I don't really. Oh, that one back there.
And then we're also doing some work that falls into the category of, like helping people outside of the movement understand what life without parole is and why it's important to stop using it as a sentence. And that's where that report that I mentioned, where we surveyed people, who had life without parole are out. We're about to start up a website that will have stories, including some that Heard Studios has put together, showing former LWAPs in a conversation with someone who's had a loved one who was murdered. And they just kind of talk about each other's experience. They talk about the sentence of life without parole. It's not something where there's like some resolution or everybody, ends being best friends, but it is just like this opportunity to observe what happens when two people sit down. And I think it's also an opportunity to really see kind of the depth of integrity that people who had life without parole and are somehow able to get out have. And then the other work I'm doing is having to do with juveniles. And like you mentioned,
you seem like you got happier when you talked about that one. I don't know.
No,
do it all when you see things.
No, it's I know. I'm not sure if your listeners will be as interested in it as the other stuff, but anyway, just working towards reducing the number of kids that get tried as adults, and we're just about to start doing some of that work outside of California. And in California, we've set in motion this big transformation to the juvenile justice system. So shutting down what's now called or was called DJJ, but is most people would know it as CYA, and shifting to locally based juvenile justice systems. And really, the real important thing is a shift from corrections, a typical corrections model like CDCR, to one that is more health focused, health and healing, and yeah.
I just saw a clip of Jon Stewart talking to Gavin Newsom, and they were inside of it looked like sort of like a cell block.
Oh,
and
interesting.
He pointed out, he said, it's hard to become humane again when you live in such an inhumane construct.
Yeah.
He's like, look around us. This is designed for one reason, to keep them away from each other, from killing each other.
Yeah.
So,
Newsom said that?
No, Jon Stewart pointed out, and Gavin Newsom agreed with them.
Yeah.
He said, absolutely.
Yeah.
He's trying to do that work to move it forward. But that's a huge part, too. The way it's built and designed, and this door opens, or like one of the most shocking things to me, and I had never realized it. I had been to Pelican Bay when Scott pointed out this is the only place in the world where a door goes tss when it opens.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, because you'd heard that so many times.
Yeah. Becomes the norm.
Yeah. And you don't realize these things, but it just becomes the norm to you.
Yeah.
And you can lose your humanity. And we don't live in Siberia. People are coming back home. So you want to create, that's the most important, the type of human being.
It's true for every single human being. And, you were talking about kind of what's the vision for post-incarceration. When we talk about people who are under age 18 at the time of their crime, I think part of the vision is, how do we make incarceration the very last resort, and instead have other opportunities for young people to really grow and thrive and kind of leave behind whatever it was that led them to criminal behavior. So I'm hoping in the next few years California will be increasing the ways that even when a youth commits a serious crime, that they can not face just being locked up in that kind of inhumane setting, 4 walls, where you're struggling to not have that be what defines you, and instead focused on healing, education, opportunities to explore. So it's not just choose a vocation, and that's what it is, but opportunities like people should be doing, during adolescence, getting an opportunity to try something on. It's like, no, I thought I wanted to do that, but I really want to try this instead. So I'm hoping we're going to be able to move the state more and more towards those kinds of opportunities.
It seems like a lot of what you do is to go, like, try to tap into people's morality. Like it's like, find that place where it's not right to do this to a human being. Like share this with me. Is that sort of the
that's
case?
interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but it is. I think that's probably you're probably hearing like my perspective on it is like, wait a minute, this is not how we should treat young
Human
people.
beings, yeah.
This is not how we should treat human beings. Yeah, so I think there is.
And then you
an
bring
element to it.
the science along, which has made it powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the things that you've brought up a couple of times too, which are, it's like, what do we want to be like a society? What kind of society do we want? And if people are going to get out, who do we want them to be? What kind of tools do we want them to have?
Sure.
Yeah.
I want to thank you.
My pleasure. It's been nice talking with you.
Yeah, this is it doesn't get no more full circle than this right
Yeah,
here.
right. That
This
is so
amazing.
true. That is so true.
I'm wearing my
Yeah.
sweatshirt, but I got goosebumps about 10 times. But from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much. I speak for many, many, many hundreds of men. Your name ring bells across the yards and it ripples across the day rooms. You give hope. And because we know you fight for us, that goes to you and your whole team. I know there's people that, help you as well. And thank you so much. Thank you for coming on here. And this is what we're trying to do. These are the conversations we're trying to have.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really nice.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Okay, that's the Strangest Fruit podcast. This was a really personal, intimate conversation that I wanted to have for a long time with someone who I actually spoke to, as we talked about in 2014. And special day for me. Full circle moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.